Your business is in sync with LiveSync. This webinar is powered by LiveSync Accounting and Xero Accounting Software. Introducing Attorney Dexter Distajo.
Okay, now we go to sales and receipt transaction. So Xero, when you're using Xero, you can do sales invoicing, sales quotation. You can record customer receipts, either partial payment or full. You can issue credit notes. You can edit, delete, or void invoice, quotations, receipts, and credit notes. You can send statement of account directly from Xero by email. You can repeat the invoices of your customers. So for example, you're in a business wherein your clients are paying you retainer, then you can use repeating invoice. You set it up that without you doing additional work while you're sleeping, the system will just automatically send the invoice to your customer. And then you can set up the auto reminder, the one that I showed you earlier. You can attach document, and then you can create also invoice template branding. This is the one that I was showing you earlier. You can send invoice and receipt by email. Okay, so what I would do now is to show you. Now, when you're going to do sales invoicing, you have to go to under business menu and then focus on these three parts here. You have the sales overview, would tell you the snapshot of your sales transactions. So this is your sales dashboard in Xero. So in Xero, you have a big dashboard in front of you when you log in, but Xero has also mini dashboards, like sales has its own mini dashboards that will tell you what are the draft invoices, what are invoices that is waiting for approval, what are invoices waiting for payments, and what are invoices. And then if you have quotes, you can create quotes from there, okay? So here you can create statement of account, and then you can create invoice code, repeating invoice, credit note, like I said. So now we will be ready to create invoice. Okay. So this is a typical invoice screen. Now, again, there is a shortcut here. When you click here, it's the same thing as you are doing that from the dashboard. So I will create a, so take note, I've not created any customer. So in Xero, it will allow you to create the customer or the contact details of the customer the first time when you're creating the invoices for them. So now I will say sample customer. Okay. And then I date that today. And then the due date is automatically calculated as, how many days is this? It's July 10. Okay. And then take note, see the prefix is already here. And then we can say marketing monthly fee. And then I can select template I would want to use. Okay, here is an icon where you can attach. Okay, you can find the files, you can attach any supporting documents. That's the beauty also of the system. So if you have supporting documents in this transaction, you can attach this. So maybe you would be an audit review or internal review. You don't need to dig in the files. You can just view it here, the data. This is where you can select the currency of this invoice. So for this presentation, we are going to use AED. Now, what I would do would be creating a marketing fee for June. So let's say I'm billing them for 1,000 per month. The default, the sales is already showing up here. The VAT is already showing up here, being the default in our system, right? But you can actually change this to Abu Dhabi, you can change this to Dubai. You can change the account if you'd want to. And then take note, branch. You can select, maybe this is a sale from branch 1. And this is from your department, which is the sales department. Okay. Here, You can switch the rows as you want, okay? You can delete extra rows if you don't want, okay? You can add lines if you want. So here the presentation would be, the VAT would be showing up here if this is tax exclusive or inclusive. So the default is exclusive. If this is 1,000, it adds up, then this is your total invoice amount. Here, when you're doing this in Xero, you do not create a separate line entry for VAT output, okay? In your, when you don't normally do in other systems. So here automatically, Xero creates a system entry at the back end of this transaction, which I will show you now. Shortly. Then you can select whether you want this as draft or not, submit for approval, or save to another. So what I would do, save this for draft. Once I do this, this particular invoice I've created is already in our draft dashboard. I can approve this or submit this for approval because maybe the user is only invoice only, then he cannot approve, right? So if he's an advisor or a standard user, then he can approve this automatically. So he can do approval from here by clicking this and taking this, or technically I can just go up back here and just say submit for approval. So now the status of the invoice is submit for approval. Here's the question, sir, if we have at this point, is this transaction already entered in our ledger? The answer is no. I will show you why it's not. Because when you run a profit and loss, there is still nothing there, right? Profit and loss is showing you nothing, no data yet, because this is a new setup company. So let's go back to our sales invoice, go back that to waiting for approval invoices. And now let's approve that by clicking here or by just opening again the invoice and then approve. So once it's an approve, yep. Once it approved, what would happen? First, this small box here will show up, meaning this is your payment box. This is where you input the payment. Now, let's go to the reports. I want to show you the accounts receivable report. What I would do is I will highlight the star here so that I can see, and then also the payable here. So later I will not come back to that. Okay. So age receivable, that transaction will be added now in your age receivable, right? And it's also in your P&L now. So that's the beauty of this system, because again, like the desktop accounting software, it's already processed immediately, right? Now, let's look at the balance sheet. This is very interesting to know because, like I told you earlier, we don't need to make a transaction for the VAT. So what would happen is Xero actually records the VAT under sales tax account. So your liability for VAT is already there. So when I try to open that ledger, you will see that line of the sample customer showing this. And this can be your basis later in your VAT return filing. Going back. So now you have waiting for payment. When you open this, brings you to the dashboard of the list of invoices that are not yet due. So there are many things you can actually do here. You can set up expected date. So maybe you would receive this payment in the end of the month. I'll save that. Why this is very important, because later when you are doing short-term cash flow, this would schedule that you would be receiving this in June 30. Okay. Now, the next step would be we are now ready to create a partial payment. So let's say we receive a partial payment from this customer on, let's say today. So look at this. When I select the account, it has a very short list of accounts that you can select. And you notice advances to staff is showing here. Why? Because when we set up the chart of accounts, we enable payment. So if you don't enable payment, that will not show up here. Why? Because if everything is automatically added here, it will clutter our dropdown. And that's a very messy thing to look at, and it's very difficult to to find the right account. So the defaults would always be the bank type. Once you create a bank type, it's already added here. So let's say for these purposes, we pay this from our rack bank, and then maybe you have a receipt voucher number of 12345. Add payment. We're making now a partial payment to this invoice. So once you add the payment, brings you back to the waiting for payment. Why still waiting for payment and not paid? Because it is still partially paid. If it is fully paid, it is only at the time where it moves to the paid section of your Xero dashboard in sales. Okay? At this point, you can still edit many things in your invoice. You can copy the invoice. You can add credit note in this invoice. If you want to see your payment entry, you can click this blue color of the amount. This is where you can see. If you feel that there's an error and you want to remove the payment, just go over here and then click remove, redo. Okay? So then I'll go back to that invoice, and then I can actually create a credit note. So maybe there's an error here, and then I don't want to actually, I will not be paid for this. I create a credit note automatically. Let's say I give him a discount, for example, by issuing a credit note or whatever, maybe a return. So I'm just doing this. So we're reversing the VAT, we're reversing the sales, and then we're applying this VAT, your credit note, to this amount, okay, up to this particular invoice. So that's one way of adding the credit note in the system. So what would happen is you have a payment here and then a credit note showing up here. When you look at in your invoice dashboard, that credit note is also added as an additional line. So when you open this credit note, it will tell you that this credit note is fully allocated. Okay. Now, you can also copy an existing invoice instead of, creating from scratch. You have a copy here and then use another example. But for example, I have another customer. So let's say I'll copy this. Yeah, I can change the name of the customer and change the amount. You can do that. Okay, so that is sales invoicing. So again, you can void, you can edit, you can add credit note, or you can repeat the invoice when you're doing. I'll do the repetition later. So there's still a balance of 340. Now I'll jump to the next part of the sales would be creating code. So I can create code here from scratch or copy from an existing invoice and create the code from there. So let's say I create a new code now, another customer. So let's say the date is 13, code 1 reference 123456. Then let us say marketing services. Okay, we can add title to this code and the summary of this code. You can also put the terms of this code. Now, let's say normally it's standard 1, and then let's say it's a contract of 5,000. You can put a discount. Let's say you're giving a discount of 10%. You can just put 10% there and automatically deduct the 500, right? No need to put like point, a fraction, or a decimal. Just point to 10 because it's a percentage already. So let's say there is no discount for that. At the early stage of your code, Xero would require you already to put in your sales account and then your tax rate. At the same time, assign the particular cost centers that is applicable to this. So example, this is the case for you. Say text, and I would just say text here. And then what I would do is you can either send this directly to the customer, right? Or save it first as draft. So the status of your code would start as a draft code. The code, you can send this to your customer from Xero, or you can download this, the PDF form, the PDF template, and email this separately. It's up to you. So if you would want to generate a PDF for that, just click print. It will not print, but it will generate the, I don't know why Xero put the word print, but actually it will not print. It will generate only the image. So this is now you have a draft code already on this. You can email this separately. Otherwise, the next step would be to send this to your customer. So there's a template already here. It will be completed, and then you just select what is the name of the customer and then click send. So for our case, we will just mark this sent. Okay. Then the status of this code would now be sent. It will be a sent status. Okay. Now, what would happen if we send a quote? We will wait for the customer, then the customer will decline or accept. So let's say the customer accept, send, you receive an email and come back to you, and then you say, I'm accepting this. You come back to the quote. The next step that you will need to do now is to accept, okay, or decline. Or you can revise or you delete it. It's up to you. For this presentation's sake, we will do accept the quote. And once we accept the quote, the next step, let me go back here so that you see how it is, the transition of this quote. Started from a draft, becomes sent, now accepted. So at this level, nothing is happening in your ledger. Nothing is being recorded. So it could be a case where the quote can be converted into an invoice that you can do in Xero, or you create a fresh invoice in Xero. You can also do that. But for this presentation, what I would want to do is I want to use the same code, okay, to create an invoice. When I do that, either I can mark this invoice or not. What is the difference? Because if I mark this, meaning I cannot link this quote already to another invoice. So in this case, what I would want to do is we link this quote only to one particular invoice. If you want to link this quote to multiple invoice, do not tick this. Instead, on the last invoice that you would want to create that links to this quote, you tick the mark as invoice. So what I would do, I just want to do one link for one invoice. I create this. What would happen is that it would create a draft invoice immediately. Right? Draft invoice. You go to your sales dashboard, it goes to your draft. Now, look carefully what would happen here. What is the difference when you're creating from scratch to an invoice, from quote to Xero is this. You see this link here? This would tell you that this invoice was linked to this. So when I click this quote here, it brings me to that particular quote. Vice versa, it would tell us that, oh, I've created this quote, I've accepted this, and I created the invoice. But which invoice did I create for this? Very simple. You just go down here and click this, brings you to that particular invoice. So there is an interconnection of the invoice and the quote. In this case, what I would do is approve this. Voila. Your accounts receivable would have two items now. Yeah? Now, we're almost done. So what we would do, the next thing that I will show you about Xero is about repeating invoice. Okay? So you might want to create a repeating invoice because you're doing a retainer for this customer. So let's say you want to do this in July, August, September. For you to automate your invoice without you doing anything, the best thing is actually doing a repeating invoice. How do you do that? Is just by going to your options button and then click repeat. What basically Xero would do is we just copy the one that you have repeated the invoice, the details, that copies everything. Then if it is a monthly, you just say 1. If it's quarterly, you just put 3. When would be the next invoice? What I would do is it would be on July 6. When it will end, so let's say it's 1 year, then you can do that as May 6, but this is 2020. You can do that. Otherwise, you leave it open. It's fine. What is your default due date? Could be 15 days. It's fine. Now, this is where it gets more exciting because you can actually tell Xero whether this repeating, once it reaches to this date or every date it recurs, it just goes to your draft, or it goes to your approved status, or which we normally do is an approved for sending. So when you select this, okay, what would happen is Xero would automatically email and send the invoice directly to your customer without you doing anything every month. So that's what we're doing in our firm. So when we're billing, everything is automated. So let's assume this is still the same case for you, standard. So maybe your fee now would be 1,500 per month. What I wanted to do is I'll just put a step back. I change that to another date, maybe on 10, right? So that I will have a duplicate. So take note, I have only, right now, I still have one sample invoice, one invoice for sample customer. When I save this, the system will ask me an email. Okay, so maybe I'll say the board, for example, just putting an email, right? And then I can attach whatever attachment I have. That's the beauty of sending also. So in your whatever you have attached here, it will send also as an attachment to that invoice. So I'm done with that. So what would happen? So I have now under a repeating was one repeating. The next invoice would be September 10 because every 3 months. But let us look at my invoices. So it generated already automatically for me. Okay, so it created automatically. So if you look at this now, let's look at this very quickly. See, it will mark you it's repeating, and then you can make payment to that in that system. Finally, is sending statement of account. So when you want to send a statement of account, in your sales overview, there's a send statement button. In Xero, there are two types of statement of account. You have outstanding and activity. What's the difference? Outstanding would only show you invoices, okay, that are still not paid. But the activity will show you all transactions, including the payment and the credit note, the history basically of that customer. So let's do sample customer. So this is now what is outstanding. There's a payment. This is still the outstanding. What you can do is you can email this to your customer, and then, or you can print this and then send this to your customer on your personal email. That is an option you can do. So this is now how it looks like with your statement of account, right? So I can also do activity statement. So look at what is the difference of this. Here, the credit note and the payment appears as a separate line, basically telling you the history or the activity of this customer. Again, you can email and print that send that to separate personal email. So that's how you do it with sending a statement of account. Okay, so we're done. We have created quotes. We have created invoices. Normally, as an owner, I would want to look at accounts receivable from time to time so that I would know what's going on with my accounts receivable. Now, I can actually click this button here, show invoices. So then I can see the breakdown of the invoices per customer. By the way, the beauty of cloud accounting is one of the difference is you can actually duplicate separate sheets and do simultaneously separate. So if you like working with two screens or multiple screens, you can actually extend your computer screen to another screen, and then you can shift, and then you can do as many things as you want separately on each of the tabs, right? So I can do quotes as well here. I can do reports as well here, right? So that's one of those things that you can do. So that's age receivable that is connected to sales.